What's up, Gould Miners? Today, we welcome Sarah Weaver to the program. Sarah is a seasoned real estate investor that focuses primarily on midterm rentals. Over the last decade, Sarah has amassed a portfolio of midterm rental properties across the U.S. while also writing the book on midterm rentals called The 30-Day Stay. And in this episode, we dive headfirst into midterm rentals, starting with some of the advantages of investing in midterm rentals as opposed to investing in short-term or longer-term rentals. Later on in the episode, Sarah discusses some of the economic drivers that she looks for in a market in order to decide whether or not it is a sustainable market for the midterm rental strategy. And finally, to conclude the episode, Sarah shares her outlook for midterm rentals over the next 5 years and what to consider before diving into midterm rentals yourself. This was an incredibly refreshing episode. Sarah is a highly respected member of the real estate investing community. And man, at the end of the episode, she had me wanting to invest in midterm rentals. So without further ado, everyone, let's welcome to the show, Sarah Weaver.
The Gould Mine Podcast.
Sarah, welcome to the Gould Mine.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you, and we've definitely got some shared stories here, some shared experiences. I know that you originally, or maybe not originally, but you pivoted and made the move into midterm rentals. And I'm not sure and I'm not sure, and you'll have to clarify here, whether that was like the strategy from the start, or did you kind of like stumble your way into like the midterm rental strategy? How did that work?
Yeah, it's really unique. So I have been investing in real estate since 2017. And in 2016, I actually met some girls at a hostel in Colombia. For anyone that's traveled to Colombia, I was in Minca, Colombia, at this really cool Casa Elemento hostel. It's like one of the coolest hostels. And I remember being like, wow, what an interesting life. They go and they have these like travel nurse contracts for 13 weeks. They bust their ass. And then maybe they do like 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And then a lot of them just like F off and go backpacking. And so that's where I was meeting, like not just one, I think I met like 10 that year at different hostels all over South America and Europe. And I was like, this is brilliant. And I was dating someone at the time who was having a quarter life crisis. He had just gotten out of the military. He was pre-med before he went into the military. And so I was like, this is what we're going to do. You're going to become a travel nurse. I already work remote and we're going to travel the US. You can finally get that dog you wanted. And this is what we're going to do. Well, it turns out that I knew what I wanted my life to look like. I wanted to buy real estate and travel the world. And he wanted to like get married and coach Little League like tomorrow. And that was like not quite the timeline that I was looking for. And so we ended up breaking up. And what's wild is that 6 months after breaking up, I owned my first property and I ended up doing a rent by the room strategy. So I lived in one room. I rented out all the rooms to young 20-somethings because I was a young 20-something. And then I was the best roommate because the best roommate is someone that pays on time and is never there. And so I spent most of that year in Europe. I still was traveling South America. And that's kind of when I realized like, wow, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep working remote, keep living my life, and I'm just going to pick up rental properties every year. Yeah. And then when I started learning about furnished rentals, I was like, well, I don't want another job. I already have a job. I don't want like a 2-night, 3-night turnover. They need something. They're going to message me. I'm going to be like out at a club in Buenos Aires, and I don't want to be dealing with that kind of stuff. Or worse, I'm going to be in Europe and 6 p.m. US time is like midnight. And so I was like, I don't want to be doing that. And so I thought back to those girls that I met that were travel nurses, and they told me that they were living out of Airbnbs. And so I thought, oh, this is amazing. I'm going to buy property near hospitals that have a lot of travel nurse contracts, and my guests will stay 13 weeks. And I'm a good landlord. I'm going to have like a 2-day turnover and then get another person in there for 13 weeks. And that very first year that I did it, I had 97% occupancy. And so I nailed it.
Wow. That's, I want to get back to that in a second. So yeah, because that's hard to do even. It's pretty hard to do. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there, right, Sarah? But it sounds like it sounds like primarily the strategy right now is, or maybe the strategy's evolved, but originally the strategy was, let's identify properties that are rentable near hospitals where we can deploy a midterm rental strategy.
Yep.
Is that still even to this day, that is still the game plan?
Yep, it's still the play. I love these duplexes, fourplexes with smaller units, like a 1-1 or a 2-1.
Yep.
They're a little less attractive to your traditional, guys who have owned properties for 30 years. They like the duplexes that are like the 3-2s and the 3-2s side by side. So I'm able to pick up some of these 1-1 units that are less attractive to your traditional long-term rental landlord. And that's what I like to do. The midterm rental strategy, I think, has always been really complex. It was just called different things. You had corporate housing, relocation specialists, what we now know as like displaced insurance policyholders. Obviously, man-made disasters and natural disasters are not new. We just are talking about it more in the midterm community, midterm rental community. And so that's another play, is you can turn some of your single family homes, no matter where they are, no matter location, to, hospital, city. They can even be in small towns. And these can then be used as midterm rentals for people that can no longer live at their house because of natural disaster or man-made disasters.
So the definition of a midterm rental then is, what I'm hearing is like 2 to maybe 6 months.
I say
occupancy?
anything over 30 days.
Okay. Over 30 days, but less than a year.
Well, I mean, heck, if someone wants to sign a year lease at midterm rental rent rates, by all means. I'm still probably going to call that a midterm rental. I call it my favorite midterm rental, which I have, by the way.
Yeah.
I have someone that just signed a 1-year lease starting in November, which is usually my slowest time. Anytime I have a vacancy, I'm around Christmas time. I'm like, oh, this is going to be, a trudge to get it filled. And he was like, yeah, actually, can I rent it for a year? I was like, furnished, utilities paid for at this price. He's like, yep, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And how he found it was my bottom unit was vacant as a long-term rental. And I was actually just looking for a 6-month lease to get me out of this, ugly November timeframe for a long-term rental. And then he was like, is upstairs an Airbnb? And I took a deep breath, because I know a lot of people don't like living underneath Airbnbs. And I said, yes, it is a furnished rental. And he goes, great. Can I rent the whole house? He's like, my dad is looking for an apartment. He is living in a furnished place right now. And so it would be amazing. He can move into the furnished unit and help me take care of my son. And so he and his, elementary school son moved into the bottom unit, and his dad moved into the furnished unit upstairs.
Nice.
So now I have 100% occupancy for 12 months on both the long-term and the midterm.
That makes perfect sense. And so, it's interesting is that, because another name for this and another name that a lot of people use is the concept of a fully furnished rental, right? It's like, hey, I've got a fully furnished. And so I guess my question is, and for anyone that's at home right now, because Airbnb is kind of the sexy thing, or at least it was maybe until a year or two ago, right? I think people are starting to kind of change their minds a little bit, or their opinions are maybe a little bit more jaded. What would the advantages be, right, of owning a midterm rental, or and deploying a midterm rental strategy as opposed to short-term rental? Let's start there. Then we can kind of go to the long versus long-term rental. But let's start, midterm versus short-term. What are the inherent advantages of a midterm rental strategy?
Yeah, so it's going to be really dependent on where you're at. If you're buying something in Joshua Tree, go short-term. If you're buying something in the Smoky Mountains, go short-term. Those are not the types of properties we're talking about. We're not talking about vacation rentals spots. We're talking about actually second-tier cities. So let's take my fourplex in Omaha, Nebraska as an example. It's a 4-unit apartment with 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartments, all with their own entrance, parking spot in a good part of town. Yes, you snobs, there are good parts of Omaha, Nebraska. And what I like about this is that in the summer, I can run it as a short-term rental. There's no short-term rental regulations as of right now, knock on wood. And I can run it as a short-term rental in the summer because 2 things happen in Omaha that attract a lot of guests. The College World Series in June and the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder event in February. I joke that that's the one where I go into town and I open my dating app because those are the people I want to be meeting with, right? And so those weekend, that week and that weekend, then I can be full with a short-term rental. So if I open my calendar, let's say in June, I allow 2-night, 3-night, even a 1-night stay, I may experience 80% occupancy at a higher rate. But what happens is come August, September, if I'm still running it as a short-term rental, no one's coming to Nebraska like Monday through Thursday for a short-term rental. Oddly, in the summer, I do want to point out that I get a lot of those 1-night floating dates filled because there's this trend. A lot of Midwesterners drive from Chicago area to Denver, and Nebraska and Omaha's the perfect middle like sleepover spot. So oddly, I have a girl that has done that every year since I bought the property. She's like, hey, coming through again. And so if I have a night open, the last summer I had nothing open for her. But yeah, so that's another phenomenon. So I say all of that to say that it does work as a short-term rental some months of the year. But then I start to see lower income in the fall, definitely in the winter. Even right now, I actually have some New Year's Eve spots open. I went ahead and changed them to 2-night stays. No one's booked my apartments for New Year's Eve. And so I'm actively looking for midterm rentals. So let's talk numbers. So I could get anywhere between $1,800 and $2,400 in June because of the World Series, College World Series. So I'm excited about that. But what I'm not excited about is the increased messaging, did this happen? Did they break something? And now I need to hurry and fix it before the next guest gets in there. Every summer, I'm like, I hate short-term rentals. A midterm rental, I'm getting anywhere between $1,600 and $2,100. So why the heck would I not just stick with midterm rentals?
And that's monthly rate. That's monthly income.
Rate. Monthly income, correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's per unit. And so let's just do some quick math. Let's say that I'm getting $1,875 per unit on 4 of these. I'm bringing in $7,500 as a midterm rental. My PITI is $2,090. And my average stay for midterm rentals in 2023, I don't have it for this year yet, but for 2023 was 87 nights. And so what I always say, it's about 75 of those days are silent. They are not bothering me. I'm not bothering them. I can go hike for 2 days and turn my phone off, and I have my virtual assistant monitoring it. And I come back on off airplane mode. I'm terrified something's happened. And they're like, nope, everything's good. Haven't heard anything. That's the joys of the midterm rental in these, what I call second tier cities. I think you can make more money as a short-term rental in other locations. But when we're looking at these kind of properties, I will gladly take $200 less per month for less headache.
Right. Yeah. Cause I mean, it's like the risk versus reward, right? It's like, hey, how much? And then by the way, like what happens if it doesn't rent and you had a solid month, midterm rental renter that was willing to take it, but then you're like, hey, now I'm going to try and squeeze a few more bucks out of this property. And then as a result, you get nothing. And
exactly.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. Well, in Omaha too, that's an interesting city. I was looking at a couple. So I invest in hotels, and I was looking at a couple hotel properties in Omaha, and I know that there's quite a few hospitals in the Omaha area. Correct?
Yep, and pretty large hospital complexes as well. And so it's a great place to invest. I'm really happy with my properties there. And
you've also got Creighton, right? In the area too. So
and
there's a lot
military.
of solid demand drivers.
Another thing people don't realize is that 18% of Furnished Finder guests are military, and you have Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha.
Oh wow! I did not know that. Okay. So what it sounds like to me is there are a lot of demand drivers in the immediate area that would support midterm rentals. So let's go there. We've talked about hospitals. We just talked about military bases. What other demand drivers typically support a healthy midterm rental?
Yeah, I think it's really going to surprise a lot of people. I have people that are moving to the city for a job. So you want to see job demand just like you would if you were investing in a long-term rental. You want to see population growth just like you do with a long-term rental because people are moving there. And so I've had people, stay in my properties because they're looking for their forever home or even just want to get to know the area. We don't get a lot. I know this is going to shock people. We don't get a lot of digital nomads, but we did get some. We get some people who are maybe grew up in Nebraska, but they live in New York. And they're like, I just wanted to get out of the city for a month and be close to my parents, but not live with my parents. And so I've hosted a few digital nomads. I've had quite a few family members of hospital guests or patients. So unfortunately, your husband's in rehab or heart failure. Maybe he is or isn't going to make it. You've been living at a hotel. You're miserable. You want to live in something that feels cozy and nice. And so I've hosted quite a few individuals and even small families like that in my units as well.
Interesting. And I think one of the things that I picked up on when you were just kind of describing your strategy is that you have not clearly defined like this rental is going to be 100% midterm rental. It sounds like you keep yourself open or you keep yourself nimble to take advantages of the different times of year, right? So it's like, hey, if I have this place available, I'm going to short-term rental. I'm going to STR it like during these, peak seasons, and then during the rest of the seasons look for a more like longer term renter.
Exactly. And I won't say no to a midterm rental guest or like not extend a midterm rental guest. I want to make it very clear. I would love to never run it as a short-term rental. Like, sorry, College World Series, Sarah's places are not available because it's annoying. But if it just so happens that there is a vacancy, then I may adjust my calendar accordingly. And so I think that the lesson there is that I'm not a sit it and forget it landlord when it comes to my midterm rentals. I want to never hear from them. But if I know that a vacancy is coming, I'm strategically looking at my calendar to see what is the highest and best use of this unit. But if I get if I get somebody who wants to rent my unit, I'm not rented out in June for the College World Series, I would much rather have a 3-month, 4-month stay from a midterm rental than even mess with short term. But I do love that I can do that. I'm under contract right now on a property in Kansas City, and there is very strict short-term rental regulations. And so there is no short-term play with this property.
I want to get back to that in a second. One thing that you said though with vacancies, and something that just popped into my mind is, every time that there's a vacancy, you got to turn the property, right? You got to turn the unit. And obviously when you turn it, there's cost, right? There's overhead. And clearly through a lot of these apps, you're going to pay, rooms, all these extra fees, right? It's like, why am I paying more fees for less service? That's what you're like asking about with Airbnb, right? So you've got the fees, which I would presume cover the majority of the overhead when it comes to turning the property. But what does the profit margin look like on a midterm rental versus a short-term rental? Are you seeing relatively similar profit margins post fees, right? Like let's eliminate like the fees from it, or actually include the fees in the short-term rental, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you seeing relatively similar like bottom line numbers, or what does that look like?
Well, let's take the unit where I have a year-long midterm rental. The cost for that unit is better because I'm not replenishing toilet paper, paper towels, shampoo, soaps. There's no replenishment fee for 12 months. At this point, guys, we're talking $27? But if you take $27 times every unit, there is a cost associated with replenishing. I charge a cleaning fee, and now my cleaners get more expensive every year. That now the cleaning fee is exactly what the cleaner charges me. When I started, there used to be like a nice $50, $40, $30, $20 buffer that I would profit. But now there's no buffer, and I'm not going to keep raising. I'm already at a $175 cleaning fee for this tiny little one-bedroom bath. And so there are costs associated to the multiple turnovers. I have been very diligent about collecting security deposits, pet fees, pet deposits, especially if they're booking off Airbnb. So if they find me through Furnish Finder or Zillow or apartments.com, That's a part of the lease. And so that covers a lot of those, extra cleans, replacement of rugs. A lot of that is not coming out of my pocket. It's coming out of those fees or security deposit. And then with Airbnb, if the damage is bad enough, then I'm going through air cover. And I think I'm one of the rare investors that has a good experience with air cover. I know that there's a lot of upset investors with that whole process. It's not fun, but if you're patient and you actually have all of the details, I have gotten all of my air covers approved.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of like negative things about air cover. I guess like, I guess people air their, maybe, you have like your insider conversations with people, right? They're all, so that's interesting. Speaking of you were talking about Kansas City earlier. We've talked about Omaha, but outside of Omaha and Kansas City, are there any other markets that you are invested in?
Yeah, I'm investing in Des Moines. So I have properties, they're all duplexes actually. So I own duplexes in Des Moines and Urbandale, Iowa, which is a suburb of Des Moines. And what's interesting is I bought those. I had never even been to Des Moines.
Okay. What's special about Des Moines? What does Des Moines have that leads you to believe that you're going to be able to execute the strategy?
It has a great agent that sends me cash flowing deals.
Okay. Gotcha.
And they're great. Is it my favorite market? No, I hope I don't ever regret saying that on our podcast, but it's not my favorite market. I don't think rent increases are as good they're definitely not as good as Kansas City, but I also don't think they're as good as Omaha. But my occupancy's good. My properties are good. I'm really glad. I own 8 units there.
In Des Moines.
So we're also not talking huge portfolio, you guys. Like I own 20 units. It's a small but mighty portfolio. And I think that's the other thing is like when I'm talking to new investors and they're like, oh, like what if I can't keep it filled? And I'm like, if you can't keep one midterm rental filled, then like I wouldn't get into the game. Like I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because obviously you're quite successful and the portfolio size, you say, okay, I've got 20 units. How did you go about kind of getting that you got the first one, right?
Yep.
But then how have you been able to grow it? Like I'm assuming you've used your own funds, right, to continue to grow the portfolio. But what was that growth period like?
Yeah, so I'll go through this kind of quickly, so please stop me if you want to ask any questions. But I did a house hack 3% down using the Home Ready owner-occupied loan. 2 years later, same thing, 3% down, Home Ready owner-occupied conventional loan. About almost exactly 2 years, I think it was like a year and 9 months later, house hack again using an FHA 3.5% down on a fourplex. Then I had the opportunity to buy the fourplex next door. And I was like, oh, okay, what do I do? I've only house hacked at this point, right? I did house hack. And so that was the first time I ever did a JV partnership. So I found a partner who had been watching my journey on Instagram, had been watching what I was doing, loved the numbers. So she brought the down payment. She got the loan. She had a W-2 job. And we partnered on the property because I found it. I managed renovations. I furnished it. I managed the tenants. I managed that property. That same summer, I found those 2 duplexes in Des Moines through that agent who I think is wonderful. And it was an on the MLS perfect burr. And I was like, what? I had never used hard money, had never used private money, had never been to Des Moines, had never done a long distance renovation. And I was like, sure, let's do it. While I'm under contract on the other fourplex. And I had closed on the other fourplex 2 weeks earlier. And so it sounds badass, but like Danny, I was crying. I was like, I'm so stressed.
I get it.
But I did it anyway. I was scared and I did it anyway.
Yeah.
And so I did exactly that. I used hard money. I used private money for the down payment off a guy off Instagram. And then I did a 9-week renovation. It was actually cash flowing day one. I was able to do 2 things in one of the unit and get it rented. like 3 days after close. And so that money almost covered my hard money payments, which was amazing. Then I renovated the next unit, got it filled. Then I really was covering my monthly hard money payments. And then I renovated the third and the fourth unit, went back to a conventional lender to get a 30-year mortgage. And I had the brilliant idea of quitting my job before doing that. And so, which I'm being facetious, I knew that was going to happen. The hard money lender had a 30-year DSCR product. And the interest rate at the time, this was 2021, was 3.875. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to quit my job. So I quit my job and became a full-time real estate investor, did almost a perfect BRRRR. I have $21,000 of my own money through the renovation costs in that. Otherwise, I paid off my private money lender, my hard money lender, and all the fees and interest just through the refinance, which was amazing. Nice. And then I bought 2 more duplexes using JV partners. And so as a recap, I did house hack, JV partner, BRRRR, JV. And now I'm under contract on my next primary or house hack.
That's awesome. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there, but can we start with finding the private money on Instagram?
Yeah. So, I was at this point in the story, I own 3 house hacks, right? So for those experienced investors, like I was a baby investor, but I was attending, or I should say, I was attending all these webinars in 2019 and 2020. And so every webinar, I had my phone, I would take a picture of all the little Zoom squares and I was posting on Instagram, learning about, raising capital from Danny, like learning about private money from Matt, learning about hotels from Blake. And I was constantly talking about real estate investing online. And while I was fully nomadic, because as I've mentioned, I had a remote job. So I was living in Brazil, I was living in New Zealand. And people were like, what do you do? And the truth was I had a normal job. I worked for an American company. But what would I talk about? I talk about real estate. So if anyone ever asked me what I did, I was like, I'm a real estate investor. And then I read Matt Fairclough's Raising Private Capital. At the same time, I found Amy Majori online. And between the two of them, I learned the script. I help people make double-digit returns on their money backed by real estate. And so more or less, I said something like that to the next person that messaged me on Instagram. I'm pretty sure his exact message was, what the F do you do? You're always traveling. And I'm like, I help people make double-digit returns on their money. And he goes, cool. I've been lending to flippers in New Orleans and it's dried up and I have this cash. Would you like to work together? And I was like, holy shit, this works. Yeah. I was like, this is crazy.
That's amazing.
And so I sent that message. I kid you not. I messaged my agent, the one in Des Moines. I was like, I have money. Find me a deal today. And 2 days later, he found this on the MLS Perfect BRRRR.
Wow.
Then another time I raised capital, same kind of idea, met a woman at a real estate event. It was a 15-person event. And she's like, I make a lot of money. I'm really stressed. I have no time. My CPA says I need to do this short-term rental loophole. And all the women at the conference are like, buy a short-term rental, self-manage. And I'm just sitting there trying not to make any faces. I'm like, this is the worst life idea ever. This woman is overworked, overweight, single when she doesn't want to be. This girl should not self-manage a short-term rental. She's stressed. And so I texted that same agent and I was like, I just found more money. Find me a deal. I woke up the next morning to a cash flowing duplex that he found. I pulled that girl aside and I'm like, hey, no disrespect to anyone else, but I think they gave you terrible advice. How about we go in on this duplex together? It's going to cash flow $1,000 a month. And then if she had said no, by the way, I was about to pull my other negotiating lever, which is I would have given her all of the tax benefits, the cost seg and all of that. But she said yes right away. She's like, I like you. She's like, you really listened to me and you took massive action. I found a deal within 24 hours. And so we were under contract the next day.
Love that. That's so awesome. Well, I think this is a great, I think there's a great lesson in there for a lot of people who are listening and be like, hey, oh, Sarah, like, how did you, how have you been so successful and everything? And it's like, you took action, right? You didn't like overthink it. I think a lot of people
educated myself. Like I know I sound silly and I'm talking about drinking at hostels all over the world. You guys, I'm at these hostels and I'm reading books like Raising Private Capital by Matt Faircloth. Like I'm at the pool in Guatemala and I'm reading books about like syndications. Like I'm a huge nerd and I'm educating myself and then I'm taking massive action. And so I think what I see in the real estate community is people are using education as procrastination. And they think that they need to get like their PhD in raising private money. It's like, no, guess what? When he said yes to that, and then I found a deal, what did I do? I went to people that had already done this and I paid them for their time. That's very important. I paid them for their time to walk me through the documents, walk me through how to do this. Because if you pay somebody, they're going to walk you through very well with patience. They're probably going to give you contacts and resources, and then you're going to do it correctly the first time.
Right. Yeah, no. And that's also a valuable piece of advice there. There's the fine balance, right, Sarah, between getting educated and then, like you said, right, using education as the procrastination vehicle, right, or using it to kind of shield yourself from the work.
I need to trademark that. That's like one of my favorite things to say because it's so true. Yeah. Like I had just had somebody, I do one-on-one coaching as well, and I have been auditing her calendar has been something that I do each week. And I'm like, hey, do you hate social media? She's like, yeah. I said, okay, then why do I see a social media class at your real estate brokerage on your calendar on Thursday? She's like, well, I think I should. I'm like, no, we don't should all over ourselves here, first of all. And secondly, if you hate social media, like, did you use social media at all lead generating last year? She was like, no. I said, then great. Let's just do exactly what we did last year to lead generate and make, well over six figures. And let's just do it again. Don't waste 3 hours of your week attending a class on something that you don't even actually want to do.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I think it's great advice. And I mean, you do see it all the time, right? People kind of like doing things that they're not super passionate about. And I think there's a time and a place for that. But yeah, especially when you're building a business and there's so many different ways to get the business, right? So I actually come from residential brokerage too. I ran a real estate team here in Silicon Valley before I got into hotels and all that good stuff.
I also came from residential real estate.
Oh, you were in brokerage?
I say I was an agent for about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, honestly, what's funny is that when you said that you're traveling all over the world, that sounds like most of my realtor friends, they just kind of like, they make a sale and then they go out of town or go out of the country for a couple of months and then they come back and they're like, okay, well, I got to make my money back again. And, at least here in the Bay, you can do that because each check is like, 20,
exactly.
30 grand.
And we call those entrepreneurs, I meet a lot of those entrepreneurs as they're lifestyle entrepreneurs. And I think that that's something that as entrepreneurs, we have to make a decision. Are we going to be lifestyle entrepreneurs, meaning our entrepreneurial journey pays for our lifestyle? Or are we going to build an empire? And I think even when I was sitting at these hostels in Guatemala or Portugal, I was like, I think I want an empire. Like I respect lifestyle entrepreneurs and I think there's a place and a time, but I think I want to take my business to the next level. And then you have to start acting in a different way than these lifestyle entrepreneurs.
What's interesting is that it sounds like your mindset shifted. Right, because at first it sounds like, okay, I want to go explore the world. Right, when you first started this idea, it's like I'm gonna go explore the world and digital nomad, but now you're saying empire. So what do you think? Kind of like, what changed or what switched in your mind? Was it just like now you feel like it's possible, right? So it's almost like you got a little hit of the drug, and then you're like, all right, well, I want more, sort of thing, or what do you think it was?
Yeah, I mean, it's so, oh my gosh, it's so like cute looking back. I'm like, oh, I thought that you had to, again, this is why it's so dangerous to get educated on things like Instagram and TikTok, is I misunderstood how these loans work. I thought that you could buy an owner occupied house and then you had to wait 2 calendar years to do it again.
Right.
And it's funny. It's like I got basically the whole like intend to live in it for a year and the live in it for 2 of the 5 years to avoid capital gains. I kind of like got all that confused. And so, I mean, I really just started out thinking that that was the only way to do it, is that you bought a house and then 2 years later you could buy another house. And then like through education, I learned, okay, well, that was silly. But now it's like, well, then you need 20% down. Well, I didn't have it. I didn't have 80K. I probably had exactly 80K. That probably was my savings account. And that would have been 20% of whatever I was purchasing. And so I just didn't have the money. So then I was like, okay, but I see other people doing this. I'm like, how are these people buying all this real estate? Well, then that's when I learned about JV partnerships, BRRRRs, flips, wholesaling, DSCR loans, using private money as the down payment. And so it was through education that I realized like, oh, okay. And then I think, as you can see, like I'm definitely somebody that functions in the fear. And then I immediately like reflect on, okay, that wasn't that hard. Like it wasn't easy. I don't want to, nothing that I've done related to real estate investing was easy, but it wasn't really that hard either. And so I think that's what finally was like, oh, well, if it's not that hard, what do I need to do to just hit my financial independence goal before 40? And so I'm actually ending my nomadic life. You'll be one of the first people that I announce it to the world. I haven't even told my followers yet. And I'm actually ending my nomadic life tomorrow. I get on a plane.
Ooh.
Yeah, no. And next Friday, I close on my primary. I've never like
Sweet.
really bought a primary. Like, sure, I have house hacked, but I've never bought something that like I'm excited to live in. Like I'm gutting the kitchen and there's little to no ROI on it. I just want to gut the kitchen. Like it's wild. It's wild, like to make this shift as an investor. I'm like breaking out in hives thinking about it. It's like sweating. But what I learned was, if I could sit down in one place and stop being nomadic, could I hit my active income goals and then take my active income and put it into real estate and hit my passive income goals faster? And it was a no-brainer yes. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to hang my nomadic hat. I'm going to sit in one place for 18 months. That's my deadline. And I have active income goals and passive income goals, and we're going to see how far I can get in 18 months.
That's awesome. Well, and I do think that there is something, there's a reason why, some of the most successful business people that we all know swear by, their schedule and swear by their routine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is more difficult. That's one of the things that I've always sworn by too, is like my routine and like my rituals and just like the way that I, live my weekly life and everything. I've got to I live and die by my calendar and by my routines. And so I've always like looked at people like yourself, right? Like that are just kind of like doing the whole like nomadic thing. And I'm like, how do you do that? Cause like there's no way that I could have done what you did.
Mm-hmm.
With, like living that lifestyle. 0%
there was an opportunity cost to what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have 4 to 5 times the real estate and maybe 2 to 3 times the business, but it was so worth it. Like, let me tell you, it's been amazing. And it's funny, a lot of people in my, nomadic, like even people that are slow matting, meaning they're doing like 3 months in Mexico, 3 months in Portugal.
Sure.
They would like get a visceral reaction to what you just said, like rituals and routines. But I'm flipping it on its head. And this is what I do is, so like, I'll give you guys a real life example. So next year, okay, I'm very vulnerable. These are like actually my 3 goals. My next 3 goals for next year is a meaningful relationship, sustainable weight loss, and to make $1 million from my coaching business. So then you ask yourself, okay, what are the things what needs to be true to make these happen? Okay, meaningful relationship, I need to go on a weekly date night. To sustainably lose weight, it's all about nutrition. So, all right, I'm going to get completely vulnerable and I'm going to actually tell you my 3 goals for next year. So
love it.
It's build a meaningful relationship, sustainable weight loss, and make $1 million from my coaching business. And so then you ask yourself, like, what needs to be true for those things to happen? So meaningful relationship, the first thing, a weekly date night. Okay. Then sustainable weight loss. For me, it's all about nutrition. So I was like 80% dialed in on nutrition, 100% gluten-free. I found out I can't eat gluten is one thing I learned. So, and then for $1 million, that is 9 new coaching clients a month. So that's okay. So then you go a step further. Okay, what would make it easier for this? And I was like, okay, well, for the weekly date night, I need a new assistant because I'm glued to my phone. My assistant is at capacity. I don't even think I could like walk away fully and be present. So new assistant, okay, which is going to then also help with the third goal, right? And then for nutrition, why don't I just hire someone? Like in Kansas City, I think I can hire someone to meal prep for me twice a week. Okay, so easy. Then what needs to happen to have 9 coaching clients? I guess if I just did some sales calls. Okay, what needs to be true for you to do sales calls? I was like, have time on my calendar and be well rested. Okay, what do you need to be well rested? 7 hours of sleep? And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, there's that was it. 7 hours of sleep, hire someone to cook for me, hire a new assistant, clear my calendar on. And then she was like, what day do you want to do sales calls? I was like, Tuesdays. There we go, done.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that was easy. Like now you need to go do the things.
Yep.
But I think that for anyone that's listening that like hears Danny say like routine and is like, ugh, it's like, okay, it doesn't have to be that rigid.
Yeah.
It can be this pretty simple activity of like, in order to hit that goal, what needs to be true? And it is going to end up being a routine. Sorry, everybody. But it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be into cold plunging or 5:30 wake up calls, whatever. Even though I'm really into cold plunging, by the way. I feel like anybody that is loves to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So I hope that helps. Do you do something similar?
Yeah. So, well, yeah, 100%. I mean, I was plunging for like almost 2 years. And then like earlier this year, I had like a weird experience in the cold plunge one day. And like, it was kind of weird. Like I was like, I didn't feel right. It was kind of strange. So I was like, maybe I'll take a few months off, but it's usually in the winter when I do the cold plunges because I just keep the tub outside, and I can just get in. So I've been procrastinating on that, honestly though, Sarah. But yeah, it's, it's gym and it in the morning you wake up, go to the gym and then work. And then I usually, I do my cardio in the morning and then I do my weights kind of in the afternoon or the evening, just depending on, what the schedule looks like for the day. But mornings are usually set for me personally for like work, right? Like work, either, emails, getting whatever, all the administrative work done, right? For the day, underwriting hotels. So I underwrite a lot of my stuff during the morning. And then the afternoons are all like always like meetings, right? So, appointments and all that good stuff. But anyways, coming back to what you were talking about just before we started diving into the routine stuff, we got sidetracked a little bit, but I want to come back to, the midterm rentals and kind of like what your prognosis is, or like what you believe like the market's going to look like for midterm rentals here. Just like, let's say over the next 5-ish years or so, right? Like, are you, obviously you're doing it, right? So like, I'm assuming that you're bullish, but I'm curious as to why, you believe that this is a sustainable strategy for the long term.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to say is tied back to what you said earlier about people not being super happy with the Airbnb experience. So I do think that our potential tenant is going to get savvier. And so we need to find ways to get in front of them outside of Airbnb and VRBO. So I think Furnish Finder will become more important. Zillow, apartments.com, any of these like websites that syndicate out to other websites. And so then it's really important that your systems are dialed in because these potential tenants are blanket messaging tons of places. So then they're texting you back. They're like, hey, sorry, what unit is this? I don't remember. And so I think having an in-house assistant or in-house property manager is going to be really important. So my team's in the Philippines. They're well-trained. They're walking through these like different guest inquiries, checking references, setting up their leases. They're handling all of that. So I think that's one thing I want to point out. As far as being bullish on midterm rentals, I think what I'm bullish on is having lots of tools in your toolbox to analyze every deal. So if a deal comes to me, I'm asking myself, can this be a long-term rental? If the answer is yes, then I'm going to keep it a long-term rental. Or does it need to be a short-term rental or a midterm rental? Or is it a wholesale? Or is it a flip? Is it a burr? And so I think that having all these different levers that you can pull, I think is going to be really important as a real estate investor.
Yep.
I think inflexibility is, I think, really detrimental because of the way that the market is right now. If you're only willing to, buy something, newer than 1970 in this zip code, then you might have a hard time. And so that's why I'm so passionate about people having all these abilities to pull these different levers when they see a property so that you can make a good deal out of a lot of different properties.
It's interesting. And, we touched on it a little bit beforehand. It sounds like you're relying, at least in part, you're relying on agents in the marketplace, but what other lead sources have you found, to be effective for you? And what lead sources are you leading into, like, let's say over the next 12, 24 months?
Yeah. So let's take the deals that I walked you guys through my portfolio. So that first deal I found driving for dollars. That second deal was an investor-friendly agent. Third deal, investor-friendly agent. Fourth deal was I approached the seller. He was mowing the lawn of the fourplex next to the one I own. So anytime I'm in town for my properties, which is not very often, I'm always looking for deals. So in that case, I just walked across my driveway and talked to the seller directly, and then was under contract 8 days later. And then the burrs were, let me be clear, actually, the burr that I mentioned, one of the duplexes was on the MLS. And then my investor-friendly agent asked the seller, he didn't ask, do you have anything else you're selling? He asked, do you own anything else? And he goes, oh yeah, I actually own the one next door too, but I was going to keep it. Well, guess what? We wrote him a nice enough offer that he sold us that one as well. And so that's good advice for anyone that is going direct to seller. Don't ever ask sellers if they're going to sell anything. Like, these properties are my babies. I would not sell my babies. But if you want to ask me to brag about my children, yes, I will tell you all about my portfolio.
Yeah.
And so I find that's a really good way to approach sellers, is to ask them about their portfolio. And then my most recent 3 deals, including the one I'm under contract on, all investor-friendly agents.
Love it.
Moving forward, because I'm going to go very bullish on Kansas City, I do anticipate that I will do mailers and cold calling. But I don't have the infrastructure set up right now. I'm nowhere near being able to launch that in Q1.
Yeah.
But that's the plan, because I'll be there.
Love that. Yeah. And I think the take home message here is that you've got to rely on multiple lead sources, right, to build a sustainable business. And that's, I think the same principle applies pretty much to any business anywhere. You got to have more than one lever to pull on to generate those leads. And so that's interesting. And we're running up here on time, Sarah, so I want to, get you out of here on time. But 2 final questions here for you. It sounds like, that outside of like direct to seller, the primary lead source for a lot of these deals has been, investor-friendly agents. How have you found these individuals? Is it just through like networking? Are you finding them on like sites? Like what does that look like? And how could somebody replicate that same strategy?
Yeah, so I'll tell you guys exactly what I did. A lot of it started when I was living in Argentina and New Zealand.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm doing this all remote. And so what I would do is I would open Facebook and I would type in some combination of real estate investing with the city that I'm looking in. So Omaha real estate investors, real estate sales in Omaha. And then I join all these groups. And then I have a spreadsheet called my Omaha networking spreadsheet. And I do not post in these Facebook groups. I want to be very clear. I do not post in these Facebook groups. Instead, I go inside the Facebook group and I click the little search icon within the group, and I'm typing in real estate agent or the word closed. And there's 2 reasons I do that. One is I'm looking for who else is asking for real estate agents. And then I look at all the comments and I'm copying and pasting the comments and the contact information into that spreadsheet. And then the reason I'm looking up the word closed is I want to see who is bragging about closing. So then I'm going to see, oh, wow, like Danny's crushing it. He's just closed on another deal this month. He must be someone that I should, like, he's a mover and a shaker.
I like that.
And then I'm going to start commenting on your stuff. I may add you as a friend, but I do not message you until I get more information about you. I rarely ever send a message that's like, hey, Danny, can I pick your brain? No. What I do is I wait for the Dannys of the markets to ask for something. And the moment that they ask for something, I am hitting the ground running. If they're looking for a lawn care guy, guess what? I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking within the group and I'm looking at all the lawn care suggestions. I'm finding the one that's the most suggested. And then I'm being sure that I'm posting that to Danny. And then I'm also private messaging you saying, hey, saw your thing about looking for a lawn care. Here's the most recommended in the group. I'm not saying I knew him. I didn't know who he is. I don't know this lawn guy, but I'm telling you that he's the most recommended. And then I'm starting a dialogue with you. And I'm going to say, man, you're crushing it. So compliment. I see that you just closed on your, like, what is this? Like the 10th deal. And then so I ask a question. Oh, actually, it's my 11th. Wow, you're amazing. Compliment again. How are you finding most of these deals? And sometimes the Dannys are like, I'm not telling you that, which has happened like once or twice, but otherwise they're just stoked. Like, we love talking about what we're doing, and it's no secret. Like, if it's mailers, it's mailers, right? If it's door knockers, it's door knockers.
Yeah.
But about 7 times out of 10, you have an agent. And so then I'm getting agents from the people in the area that are closing on properties. Then if it's not an agent, then I would say, hey, I'm like traveling the world and making myself sound interesting, but I'm actively buying in Omaha. Is there an agent that's actually worth their weight? And I usually say something funny like that. That's like a dig on agents. Like, is there anyone that's actually good? And then they're usually like, yeah, actually, this guy's really awesome. And so that's how I'm getting introduced to my agents.
Love that. Okay. So you're networking with the investors that are doing deals at a high level in the market. You're building a relationship with them, and then you're picking their brain to effectively try and figure out who they're working with, or get like agent recommendations through the successful investors in the group.
Yes. And you guys, like, did you hear like how easy this is? Like, when Danny says it like that, it's like, oh yeah, duh. Like, why aren't we doing this? Like, it's not hard, you guys.
Yeah. Well,
it takes time. I do the slow approach. Like, I hate when people message me like, who's your agent in Des Moines? I'm like, wow, like, good morning to you too, jackass. Like,
yeah.
Like, what have you done for me today?
Right.
And so I do believe in the slow networking game. But it freaking works. It works.
Yep.
It has great ROI.
Yeah. Another strategy that I've seen that's also effective is, like, you probably know the kinds of properties, right? The kinds of properties that you'd want to buy. And so another thing that I've seen it be effective is, this is all researchable on like public websites. Usually the MLS for any city is public. You can find a lot of information through the MLS or, Redfin or Zillow. I don't really like touting them, but they do have a lot of good data. And then figuring out, okay, well, who's selling a lot of these properties that I like am interested in, right? So you kind of reverse engineer. Hey, I like, I want to buy duplexes in this like little, community, or like this like little neighborhood, whatever. And then you just kind of look and see, hey, are there people that are popping up more than once or twice? Right? Because like if they're popping up more than once or twice, they probably control a lot of the market share there, and you probably want to like start networking with them. So I've also seen that be a good approach. But sometimes the people that sell a lot aren't necessarily the most friendly.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is that they're not the ones that are like gonna, so
hustle.
Like, let me tell you guys a story. So I was in New Zealand. I will admit, I'd been yanking this agent's chain for like 8 months. Yeah. And I finally texted him. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm 100% committed to buying something in Omaha. I sent him my ideal deal criteria. 4 days later, he found me that deal that cash flows over $3,000 a month.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yep.
It's persistence. I love it. Hey, Sarah, we are well over time now, but as is tradition here on the Gould Mine, it would be remiss if you didn't end this episode with one final gold nugget for the audience. Take it away.
Yeah, as much as I love education and I want you guys to be that nerd at a cool, rooftop pool reading real estate books, do not use education as procrastination. It is so important that you are doing the work and taking action on everything that you're learning.
I love that. That was such a great little tidbit from before, so I'm glad that you reiterated it. And just if you're interested in any of Sarah's, she mentioned a coaching program, all of the links and everything will be included in the show notes below. How to get in touch with her as well will also be there, and how to follow her on social media. Sarah, you've been awesome. This has been great. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
This has been fun. I feel like we should go get drinks and celebrate.
100%. Yeah, no, this is a ton of fun. So I'm looking forward to, maybe we'll see each other at a conference this year. I'm sure we'll be at a couple of the same ones. So it'll be great to connect outside of this.
Excellent. Thanks,
All right.
Danny.
All right, Sarah. Take care.